Hello, Liz.
Hey, Olu.
Do you know that it's been a year since we started this podcast?
I know. Can you imagine? Although the last few months, it's felt like 84 years, the last like 4 or 5 months, especially.
Yeah, you feel like Rose from the Titanic.
Yes, definitely. And it definitely feels like we're on the Titanic right now, like as a country. That's what it feels like. There's an iceberg and we're sinking.
You have no idea how accurate that analogy is. It's only been 3 months, so we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg, which is insane.
God, that is insane. I agree. But this is our anniversary episode, and so as a thank you to people who have listened to us, we do want to say that we're going to have a giveaway, a special giveaway at the end of this episode. So if you listen through to the end, you'll find out how to enter. We're giving away merch and, you know, as a thank you to followers. So stay tuned for that. But let's start the show. Let's start our special anniversary show. So it is our anniversary episode, and we're going to talk through some of our favorite episodes of the last year. But first, we wanted to start with just the big news of the week, which was the tariffs again, but this time Trump basically caving on some of them, some of the important ones around things like electronics, and overall caving on the tariffs by reducing, most people's tariffs. Which is not surprising to anybody because this whole policy, this whole trade policy, this whole economic policy has been incoherent from the start. So it's not a surprise that this is happening. I think people maybe thought he would last longer than a week, but he didn't. So again, whatever. But that was the big story this week.
Yes, I mean, it's not a surprise to China because they seem to have expected it.
That's true. They know what they're doing.
The way they've been like, tit for tatting him, it's very interesting. Um, you know, I mean, we're certainly in a very weird era. Like, to be clear, China's economic political landscape is not something to be emulated by any democracy anywhere.
Well, not all of it.
Well,
Definitely, some of it is valuable, but not all of it. Like with any other big country, there's ups and downs.
fine. But the problem, I guess, is that at least for most of the Western world, people have always expected that the USA would be the adult in the room and, it would be the CCP acting all belligerent and stuff. But we just have two belligerent strong men in Trump and Xi Jinping just like declaring whatever they want, and they're in this strongman contest for who blinks first.
Yeah, and I think you can't overstate the damage this is doing on the US side. Like you said, I think there's an expectation that other countries might engage in this kind of behavior, but America is stable. America is, the adult in the room. And what has happened now, I think, because of Trump is there's basically nobody's going to take us seriously ever again. Because even after he leaves office, fingers crossed in 2028, and we don't stretch out to a third term, which is crazy to even think about. But fingers crossed he leaves in a few years. We get, a reasonable person, a Democrat. Democrats get the House, the Senate back. They start undoing all of this bullshit. People around the world now know that America is one election away from foolishness, and they will not take us seriously even after all of this stuff is undone. And I think that to me is one of the biggest fallouts from the last few months is just the world coming to the realization that maybe they don't have to listen to us. Maybe they don't have to care what we think. Maybe we don't have the soft power we think we do because he has done so much damage to our reputation abroad. And that's very fucked up. I mean, you literally got places around, like I saw today, it's small and sort of inconsequential, I guess, in the grand scheme of things. But I saw that Brazil is now requiring Americans to have a visa to come in. And that to me was just it's such a small thing. And I don't know if it's in retaliation to the tariffs, I want to say, but it just felt like it's another sign that people around the world are like, no, you guys aren't as great as you think you are. And that's kind of sad as someone who actually loves this country, and isn't just paying lip service to being a patriot. Like, I do care what happens here. I want us to be okay. but the people in charge are just insane.
Yeah, when people say, why does America have to be the big brother of the world? They don't understand the benefits that come with being the big brother of the world, right? And, that includes just automatic rite of passage to damn near every country in the world. There is no passport more powerful than the American passport. And that is not just a coincidence. That is by decades of work and trade and exchange with multiple countries who deem the American passports to be so worthwhile. And that is being damaged because as we damage our reputation, we also damage our passports and the privileges that comes with it.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. But we'll talk more about this over the coming weeks. I imagine this week is going to be fun and exciting with more tariff nonsense. There's now talk about the US bond market even. I don't want to get into like a finance lesson or an economics lesson, but US bonds are supposed to be the most valuable, stable thing you can invest in. And people who have bought bonds over the last few decades are offloading them. That means that's a sign that they're trying to say they're losing faith in America. And that's also very bad. But we will talk about that. Sorry, I feel like I'm losing my voice. We will talk about that next week. I'm just so sad over the bond market, Olive. That's what's happening. But this is supposed to be our podcast anniversary episode. And I want to start off with a massive, massive thank you to the people who listen to us on a relatively regular basis. We don't know you guys personally. We don't know who you are personally, but thank you to people who listen to us. We are a tiny, tiny podcast. We don't have any sponsors. We do this because we enjoy these topics and we want to talk to you and we want you to hear from us. And we interact with you on social media. I just want to say thank you to the people who have listened to us. And if you've been with us since April of last year, like, wow, great job.
Shout out to the
Excellent job.
shout out to the OGs.
Yes, the OGs who are probably family and friends, because that's who started listening to us first. We thank you, all of you from the group chat. Shout out to the group chat. We love y'all. But thank you to people who have been with us from the gym, been with us in the gym, even though we're really still in the gym. This podcast is still pretty small and it's still only a year old.
Yes, but I mean, we feel that it's important to just have different voices out there. It's clear that people are getting their news and their views on politics and policies from non-traditional media now, which is generally overwhelmingly representative of a certain group of people. And we just think that we should add our voices to the political discussion these days. And we encourage people of other persuasions, other demographics, please go out there and talk with your people because people are no longer listening to the news. They are looking for essentially people like them to talk to them about what is important in our politics today.
Yeah, agreed. And I love what you said about voices and who is sharing political news or podcasting, because one of the things I think has, and I'm sure it just happened to you too, but because two of us run our social media accounts, like on Threads or on TikTok. If you see us posting, it's one of us posting. We don't have like an intern or something. But what happens to me pretty regularly on social media, when I go on a TikTok live, when I post something on Threads or a comment on TikTok, a lot of people assume things about me when I post. Um, they think that I'm a white woman, liberal Democrat living on a coast. They only have some things correct. I live on a coast. And I think it really speaks to how there's a real, I think, lack of diversity when it comes to political podcasting. And that's part of what motivated us to start this podcast. It's like there's not a lot of Black women political podcasters out there that are sharing thoughts, views, opinions, news. And so that prompted both of us to do that. And I think it's important that we get a variety of voices out there.
Exactly. The conversation is shaped by the people who engage in them.
But on that note, look through our year of episodes. So we, in the year that we've been podcasting, we try to be weekly, and we have put out over the course of that year, with breaks in between, we put out 35 episodes. So this is our 36th episode. Um, we are going to talk through some of the episodes over the year that really stood out to us in retrospect. Obviously, the big story last year in political news was the election. I don't think anyone would expect anything else to be top of mind. In our first episode, our very first episode, we were asking the question about whether the Democrats are losing the black vote. This is based on an article or articles that had been coming out in the media at the time. Remember, this was April, so Joe Biden was the candidate at the time, and people were already murmuring about whether or not the Democrats were going to lose the black vote or lose black voters. They didn't. So in November, that didn't happen. Majority of black people still voted for the Democrats, but the Republicans did chip away at some of the support within the black community, but not as much as they did in other groups. And that became a theme of the election last year, was Republicans chipping away at Democratic support from groups that typically support Democrats. Either the Republicans were able to convince people to vote for them specifically, or they convince people to stay home, which counts as well, right? And that ended up playing a big role in the election last year. Little did we know, right, in April when we started off with that topic.
I have to sigh before responding. Um, because like, as I felt back then, and I still feel now, that that narrative of this black voter drift to MAGA is, way, way overblown, right? Um, so for black women, it essentially stayed the same, give or take 2 points, right? Black women
Mm-hmm.
voted 94% for Joe Biden and 92% this time, right? Not much of a difference. And then the real difference came for black men, who went from something like 83% to 78%, which is more of like a 5-point difference. And that seems to be like a real drift.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
However, if you understand, the actual gender dynamics, wherein just men in general, right? We saw this vote as a kind of referendum for men for some reason. Men in general just vote for Trump, and I feel like using the black voter drift from Trump without including the gender story is incomplete.
Yeah, agreed. And we talked about that over the course of last year, right? Like, that wasn't the only episode where we talked about Democrats potentially losing voters that they could typically rely on. And even though the drift wasn't like 20% or something, which I think some people expected, I mean, it was actually crazy to imagine a world in which that happened, especially with black men. It ended up being around 5%. So it was overblown in its coverage, but there was some drifting, which, I'm sure analysts and experts will continue to review and talk about this last year's election. There was a lot going on. As we know, it ended up not being Joe Biden on the ticket. So you could say, even considering what people were predicting when Biden was the nominee, that Kamala Harris overperformed with black men. Just a thought. But we're not saying that. I'm
But this
saying you could.
I just want to respond to this because you make like an excellent point, right? Because this is the double standard for for Democrats versus Republicans, right? Till today, that narrative is still being read as a win for Trump, just because he shifted a couple of points here and there. But nobody is reading this as a win for Kamala, who actually managed to defy these like astronomical drift that they were predicting, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that is the problem with the political narrative, wherein just whatever Democrats do, and you posted a very helpful chart or algorithm
The
in
political
thread.
blame flow chart.
Exactly. Like whatever pathway you take as a Democrat, you just still get blamed again, and Republicans just no accountability, and not just no accountability, they actually get graded on a curve and praised for the barest minimum.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Agreed. But we'll talk about this again, I'm sure. There's another election next year for midterms, so who knows? And then another episode we want to talk about, we had our VP Madness bracket for Donald J. Trump. Again, this was at a time when we expected the ticket to be Biden-Harris, so nobody thought there was anything to do on that side. So we focused our time on trying to pick a VP for DJT. We were wrong. I want to say that right now. If you listen to that episode, we had done a bracket. We had picked our final picks.
Tim Scott, which is
We
just
picked Tim Scott for VP. There you go. Where's Tim Scott, Olu? Does anyone know? I don't.
the funniest
Um,
part to me is that he didn't even smell a cabinet post.
that's true. They could have given him something. They didn't even give him anything. All of that for nothing. I mean, honestly.
We
He
also
even got
had
married for nothing. I mean,
exactly.
I don't know his wife. I don't know. But I'm just saying, it's funny. Our pick is nowhere to be found. We picked Tim Scott. We were so wrong. JD Vance obviously was the VP choice and the VP at this point. We're not perfect over here at Liberal Banter. So we didn't know. We didn't know.
Yeah, definitely nobody should pay us to be political analysts because
No, I disagree. I disagree. I disagree.
we also thought that
Um,
he would pick Elise Stefanik, and
that's
he
true.
didn't. And he's also withdrawn his cabinet offer to her, which is just delightful.
Well, you know why he did that, right? Is because they're worried about the house. They need her to keep her seat in the house. They can't afford to have that, especially in New York. They can't afford to have it up. So that's why she's not getting a cabinet position. So sucks for her. Um, but that was our VP pick episode. We really couldn't imagine Trump picking JD Vance. And if you've been watching the news, you can see why. I mean, come on. Has he been a good vice president so far? Unlikely. And the answer is no.
He just has a special talent for still being the worst person in every situation. He was the worst person in the room with the Zelensky fiasco, right? He is comes across as the worst jingoistic person in the signal gate, like,
Mm-hmm.
back and forth. He's also came out as the worst person in the Greenland visits that nobody in Greenland wanted. And then he
Mm-mm.
piggybacked on what they already said they didn't want. Like he just finds a way to like take the douchebaggery to like
Yeah. He
an
called,
even
yeah,
higher.
he called Chinese people peasants this week,
Oh
which
yeah,
went over very well with people we were in a trade war with.
exactly. Like
That's smart.
Trump has instigated a trade war and he has still not managed to, like call them peasants. Meanwhile, here comes JD Vance to just be the absolute worst douchebag ever. It's amazing to me every time.
Yeah, he definitely finds a way. He finds a way. So, we thought Trump's campaign would be smarter than that. They were not. So here we are. Our next episode was, I mean, it's really a series of episodes where what happened with Biden dropping out, Kamala Harris becoming the nominee, then the Harris Walz ticket. That whole 2-3 week period was insane, I will say. It just felt like, once again, living through historic times. Who knew? What were you, I guess my first question, were you surprised when Biden dropped out?
Um, I was not surprised, but as our original audiences might remember, I did not think it was a good idea for him to drop out. But I was not surprised, and I got on board very quickly. And, we were just like, okay, let's go. Let's move on to
This
whoever
is
it
the
is.
plan. Yes, this
Exactly.
is the
We just
plan. This
needed
is
a
what we're
plan.
doing. Yeah,
Um,
that was definitely the vibe. I'm not going to speculate on whether or not that changed the I guess win probability for Democrats in the negative. I don't think so. I think after that first debate, they were screwed. And of course they left it up to the black woman to try and fix things. And she tried her best, but it's America. We all know how that goes, or how that went, sorry. But yes, the Harris Walz ticket I was actually excited for. I had no concept or understanding of Tim Walz. I don't live in Minnesota. I didn't know who the governor was. I had no input when he was announced. I just thought this is the the Midwestern guy we need to counterbalance the California energy of Harris Walls of Kamala Harris. So all good. And he seems like a great governor. I actually think the national audience benefited from learning about him, which was great. I think Kamala Harris did an amazing job in her debate, which really was part of why a lot of people got on board. You know, when she was announced, when they picked their ticket, there was a lot of enthusiasm. Everybody probably remembers that DNC roll call with Lil Jon. And everyone was so excited. And, you know, donors were donating, people were hype, we were enthusiastic.
Yes. Does enthusiasm win votes?
No. I think we all know we should have learned in 2016 after Hillary Clinton was the nominee that enthusiasm doesn't win votes. I mean, I still cannot listen to that fight song without like breaking out in hives. I'm still traumatized since for 9 years I can't listen to fight song. So I can't say enthusiasm wins elections, Ola.
Okay, well, how do you feel about Beyonce's freedom then?
Oh, that's fine. I feel like we didn't hear, I'm sorry, I don't want to be a hater, but I didn't hear the Beyonce song as often, personally. So that didn't like sear itself into my brain. But the
Yeah,
fight song, I can't listen to that.
yeah, yeah. I know what you mean. Yeah, so like this is this is the problem, right? This is an ongoing conversation about really when to know that you have the momentum, when to know that you have the grassroots behind you, and when to know that they're actually going to show up, at the voting booth, right? And that's really the thing that we're still struggling with. Like just the enthusiasm, the vibes just weren't good enough. And, I don't understand this need to coddle voters and, tell them that they just weren't messaged to, or that somebody just didn't like come to the rally to them, or somebody didn't have a concert for them, because all of these things were done. We all saw like all of the concerts, all of the rallies, people showing up, and people on the ground, including volunteers like us. And we actually saw normal people go from door to door in rural areas. Like rural voters in Pennsylvania told me to stop calling them. Like, this is not true that there was no outreach there.
Yeah, I mean that's all part of the blame game we had after the election. And I think we kind of knew stuff was going wrong. Or not, let me not say wrong, not great for the Democrats, because one of our next episodes, after all the sort of hoopla of changing candidates, the DNC convention, you know, the debate going really well for Harris, as we got closer to the election, one of our episodes was when we talked about how we had started talking to real voters and we were not okay. And that for us was sort of the first sign that this might not be the obvious choice we thought it was. Um, I will say though, you know, the when we volunteered, when we talked to voters, it seemed like people had all types of reasons they were going to give for not voting for Kamala Harris. I don't know if it was one reason. I know that people want to simplify it to one reason. I don't know if I agree with that, but I do agree that people gave all types of excuses for why they were against voting for Kamala Harris. They came up with stuff from when she was AG, they came up with stuff from when she was a senator. It was just everything you could think of, which some people will say boils down to racism and sexism. Choose your flavor. But that was for us the first sign a couple of weeks before the election that this might not go the way we wanted. And that episode really sticks out to me because we we were not okay, and we should have maybe even been more worried than we ended up in that episode.
Yeah, and after the fact, I guess all sorts of anonymous sources and aides started, pointing fingers and, talking about what the rural game was like, or what the outreach was like, or it's the young people that were not reached out to, or it's, the working class, whatever it is. You know, I hope over the next 4 years, actually over the next 2 years, because we have, the House coming up,
Midterms.
which is in many ways more important than the White House. Uh,
Hey, not if Trump is king.
well, that's true, but I mean, the Congress right now is not doing anything because the GOP-led House,
That's
the
true.
Senate
That's
is not
true.
going to do anything. Um, but I guess what I'm saying is, I just hope that people don't fall on the like usual narratives. We keep getting stuff like Gavin Newsom, saying that, oh, I have to go like reach out to people like Charlie Kirk. And I'm just not sure. Like, we've tried the whole drift to the right. And I don't necessarily think that it always works, right? At this point,
Hmm.
the Democratic Party is like, every cycle, it seems like the advice they get is, oh, yeah, you just need to drift more to the right. I don't think that that's the most useful advice or the most useful plan. What I find more useful is actually, how do you activate the base that is seemingly there from all the other indicators that we can see? We just don't necessarily see it in the votes in the way we should.
There was definitely a theme of that episode, right? We had shared that episode on October 24th, and that was a couple of weeks before the election. Um, and our concern that episode was that there were a lot of people who were voting based on misinformation, based on misconceptions, based on misunderstandings, based on bullshit. And we had also talked about Project 2025 last year, and we sort of we didn't gloss over it, but we paid attention to some really big points that came out of that Project 2025 because we wanted to let
What?
people
Don't
know.
sell yourself short. I remember you specifically telling me about NOA, and that is
Noah,
bearing Noah.
yes.
That is bearing out this week as
I
we speak.
I know. I literally I literally remember so much saying, we are going to have to pay a premium for hurricane warnings. And they are gutting Noah as we speak. So, we did try. That was another episode. We did try and talk about Project 2025. We wanted people to know what could be happening. Um, you know, didn't help, obviously. Not enough people talked about it with seriousness last year. I feel like even in the sort of political sphere, it was a discussion, but Trumpers and MAGA people would tell you this isn't happening. It's just, it's the Heritage Foundation. It's not Trump. And yet here we are literally walking through Project 2025 as we speak. It's fascinating how that happens.
I mean, all of it was in Project 2025. And then Trump was like, who, what? Never heard of that. And for some reason, people believed that. And for some reason, like, the media would be like, Trump distances himself from Project 2025. And it's just like, but why do you have to report it that he's distancing himself when we all know, clear as day, that this is what he is going to do? Like, it's just completely irresponsible. The sort of stuff that pundits and journalists did when this campaign was running. Like, you can say the truth. You're just not like a PR person just regurgitating whatever the campaign says. Like, you can actually say what is going to happen on ground and what is more likely to happen based on the best information you have at that time. The best information we had at that time was Project 2025, and everybody should just be covering their face in shame for not, and this is traditional media, for just not saying to people this is actually what they plan. I mean, newspapers canceled their endorsement of Kamala Harris because their owners was like, oh, we have to be neutral. We just can't say what each side is going to do. And it's like, but you know what each side is going to do. It's right there in writing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's going to be one of the things that we regret about last year, I think. At least on my end, it's just if we had better media coverage of what could happen under a Trump presidency, we might not be in this situation, but also maybe not, because people seem like they're very determined, very, very determined to vote for him regardless. But the election happened, Kamala Harris lost, and one of our last episodes of last year was when we talked about America's entering her fuck around and find out era, and how this election last year was America's Brexit moment. Something that's turned out to be really damaging for the UK is Brexit, and it turns out Trump is also damaging the US. So turns out we were unfortunately correct, and here we are.
Yes, I mean, a lot of the things that are happening, such as the Brazil passport, new requirement for American tourists to Brazil to have a visa, right? Like that's one of the many things that a lot of Britons found themselves facing, where their usual just easy right of travel throughout Europe was being affected, right? Their holidays were being affected. But even in real time, they saw like a shrinkage of their GDP, right? And now they had to go to individual countries to strike individual deals because suddenly they were cut off from the common marketplace in Europe. I don't know. Does this sound familiar to anybody? This is literally what happened. Trump is now saying, "Oh, I'm going to, I'm going to wait for individual countries to come to me to strike a deal," except we don't even know how many countries. Sometimes they say it's 75 countries that are calling him. Sometimes it's only 15. They don't seem to know who they're going to strike, a deal with. Meanwhile, China is out there like wanting to strike deals with Australia, right? Like that's insane. Usually you would expect that would be our trade partner and they would prioritize us over China. And China is making a real play for Australia right now, which we should all just find disturbing.
Well, I mean, that this was always going to happen, right? And a better leadership team would have been better prepared, um, would have put things in place to protect the American economy, American farmers, American small businesses from the impacts of the tariffs they were planning. Instead, here we are. And I think that's a good place to leave our recap, because we will have many, many more weeks to talk about what this current administration is doing. We will have plenty of time to go into this. We'll be back next week with a more sort of regularly scheduled episode where we talk about the news of the week and stuff like that. Now, I want to talk about the giveaway that we are hosting. As we said at the beginning of this episode, we're doing a giveaway to celebrate 1 year of podcasting. Um, if you made it this far, congratulations. You can enter our giveaway by liking or commenting on our giveaway posts. We're going to post on Threads and TikTok, and you can comment on any of the giveaway posts on any platform to be entered. And you will be entering to win merch from our website, liberalbanter.com. We have shirts, we have mugs, we have stickers, but the gift set you'll be entering to win will be 2 shirts, one Thoughts and Tariffs t-shirt and a Find Out Era t-shirt. You can see what they look like on our website, and also a Thoughts and Tariffs mug. So you'll get 3 things in each gift set: a Thoughts and Tariffs t-shirt, a Find Out Era t-shirt, and a Thoughts and Tariffs mug. So you can share with your friends and family. So look out for those posts on Threads and TikTok. Comment, share to enter to win for the giveaway.
All right. Thank you for joining us on this special anniversary episode of Liberal Banter. Please do spread the word about our podcast. We hope you keep coming back. See you next time. Bye for now.